Hi, I'm Sean, and today we're going to talk about dressing some natural stone for feature walls. We do a fair bit of this, and it's critical we do things the right way and we learn the right way so we can perfect the art. So a few basic tools we'll need for the work: a mallet, a chisel, a mason's brush, a speed square, a pencil, and a tape measure. With these basic items, we'll be able to dress the stone the way we need it. There are many various types of chisels for all different applications. For what we're using now, this is exactly what we need. As far as protective equipment goes, we'd like to have glasses for sure. We will be chipping stone, there will be flying objects. Some people like to wear gloves. Personally, I don't. So gloves may or may not be required. And if you're cutting, hearing protection and a dust mask. Right now we won't be cutting, we'll just be dressing, so we'll start like so. So the first thing you want to do is look at what you get. The stone will come raw and unfaced. We like to take the stone off the pile and look at what side we want to work with. Obviously for this piece here, the back is sawn. We want to choose the face that already has a natural texture. Another example would be here. This side you have two options. They both have a natural texture. You just want to choose the one that might require the least amount of work and the best product. So the first thing we'll do is find that face and mark it. So we know we want this to be our face. I like to mark the face first. I know where my finished product is. One important thing before we get started is to have a clean workstation and a clean working surface. You want to be on relatively level ground with room to work, so you can work safely and you're not stepping on objects, tools, etc. The table is also critical that it is clean. So that's what your mason brush is for. So we have our stone, we've marked our face, and now the way I like to teach guys to start is with some tools. Eventually you could put these away and do a lot of this by eye, by feel, by touch, but we're going to start out just with some basic fundamentals and the tools to get there. The first thing we're looking for is the furthest point back on the stone. So for instance, this side here is cut pretty far back, so we have to chisel it at least to this point. I don't see a deeper spot on the other end, so we're going to call this our starting point. We're going to use the square off the table to give you a 90-degree vertical line from the table. When the stone goes on the wall, it will go on the wall the same way. The grain will be horizontal. You keep your stones flat. We're going to take our square on our clean table and we're going to mark that line. That's our line that we want to chisel. We then make a mark across the top. So we have a pencil mark here. For the longer stones, you will need a framing square or a level or some sort of straight edge. When we mark across the face, typically I like to parallel the existing chiseled edge. This one's a bit beat up, but you can see here we have about 3/8 of an inch, so I want to visually make about 3/8 of an inch there. I can then hold down the straight edge square or what have you and mark a nice straight line across the top. Again, this gives you a reference line for your chiseling. You then can transfer this mark down to the other side and we have our marks. The bottom will be marked as well. So we flip our stone over, take it like so, and we have a mark here. And we have a mark here. By connecting these two marks, we have marked now the entire perimeter of this stone 90 degrees to the surface we're working on, so when it gets installed on the wall we'll be in good shape. Again, we can mark the face here and we're ready to start chiseling. So when we chisel, we like to get our material towards the edge of the table, overhanging a bit. We like to start with the ends first to avoid blowing out when we dress the top. So we take our chisel
and our mallet, and we start with our chiseling. Sorry, Duncan, you're right there, but we'll get you in there. I like to keep my pencil line so I have some frame of reference. You'll notice when chiseling, there's many different angles you can approach. Towards the corners, you can be a little bit less steep. When you get into the middle of the stone, you can take a bit more. And when you get to the top corner again, you take a little bit less. The straighter you go with the chisel, the more material you'll take away. You don't want to go past the pencil line. Again, I like to leave my pencil line there for reference. I can see where I'm at and what I'm going to end up with. This end is now dressed. We'll spin the stone around and we'll do the other end. When you have a lot of material, sometimes you can pick away at it. You don't need to take it all the way in one shot. So you can come in and take a little bit. Again, on the bottom corner, take a little bit less. And work your way up. You can always go back and take a bit more if you want to. If you go past the line, you can't add more stone. The two ends are now dressed. We can work on the face, top and bottom line. Like to keep, again, a bit of the stone overhanging the table, and away you go. On the corners, again, a little bit less angle, and we work our way through. We don't need to hit the stone that hard. This is softer material. Certain stones will require different chisels, heavier mallets, more force, etc., etc. For what we're doing here, we're trying to maintain a consistent angle and a consistent swing, so you end up with a uniform look across the face. We finish the top edge, we can now flip it over and work on the bottom edge. Again, we like to keep the material at the edge of our table with a bit of overhang and in a comfortable working position. We start on the one side, again maintaining the same angle and the same force, so we end up with the same appearance on the face of every stone. Sometimes you'll need to use a piece of the chisel, sometimes you'll use the whole width of the chisel. It depends on the texture of the surface and how much material you want to take away. Trying to save our pencil line again ensures that we see what we wanted and we end up with a nice square edge around the perimeter. This stone is now ready to go on the wall. It's been dressed around the four sides and it's good to go. Those pieces will be used to fill in the inner portions of the wall. We'll now talk about how we make a corner. I'll show you down here an example of a corner. On the wall. So the piece we just faced only has one dressed edge. The corners will have two dressed edge, hence the corner. So the first thing we want to do when making a corner is find a good piece to start with. There will be good stones and bad stones to make corners with. We obviously want to pick something that is relatively good. If it's been sawn, it's going to be a little bit harder to get that back to a textured face, so you might want to avoid something like that. If it's too skinny, by the time that gets dressed, you might not have much left. So you want to kind of pick and choose what you want to work with. We've pulled a piece out over here. That would be good to get started with, to make a corner, and as you can see, we already have a mark on it. So we want something with a bit of texture, with a bit of width, so once it is squared off, we have a nice finished product. Again, we'll be using the same tools, same techniques, just a few added steps. We'll make sure our table's clean before we get going. Before we dress the long faces, we want to make our corner first. If we can't get our corner the way we want it, there's no sense to face the edge. So we'll start with the corner. We still want to look at our face. Typically, I like to take the bulge and call that the face. However, you can use the other surface. It depends on what you're matching and the style of wall you're after. but we'll call this the face. Since it's a corner, we're gonna have another face. We're gonna mark that face as well. Same techniques, same principles apply. We want to have the stone overhang the table a bit and start working away. Before we go and take back to our line, let's remove some of the bulk first. We'll start on the flat sawn edge. That will get the best purchase on the chisel, and we'll be able to remove the most material that way. So we start by taking a bit down. When we get close to the corner, again, give the chisel a bit more angle. When we get in the middle, we can straighten our chisel out a bit, and you can always go back and clean it up if you need to. We have the top edge dressed. Back to our line. We'll leave that one for now, and let's work on our bottom edge. We're going to take these two marks and connect them together. And there we go. Again, we'll get rid of some of the bulk first before we come back and get the finished line. Now that we've done the two easy surfaces, we're going to work on the textured surfaces. They will require a little bit more skill, but definitely achievable. With the sawn edge, you can get good purchase with the chisel and generally use most of your chisel. With the textured faces, you don't always have a good flat surface, so sometimes you'll be using just a portion of your chisel. That's okay. That will be your best approach. So we'll start with this again. We're going to get rid of some of the bulk first, and I can come relatively 90 degrees to the material with the chisel, as we are taking a fair bit and we are away from our corners. So let's try to get rid of some material here. And we start working up our line. You can always go back and take a bit more if you need to, and keep your pencil line. We're relatively close there. We're going to spin it around, and we're going to get the other side now. So I'm going to reposition myself on the table just for the video purpose here, and let's go this way. So this doesn't need too much material to be taken away, but you can see down here I can only get so much of my chisel on the stone, so I start with just a bit of the chisel, working my way up the pencil line and staying on a little bit more of an angle at the corner. Okay, we're relatively straight. We're relatively straight. Now we have to approach it from the other angle. As you can see now, we don't have a nice square corner. So let's start working on marking those out. This is where marking the face is important. So we have called this the face and this the face. We're going to do the same thing on this side. I believe it was here and it was here. When we chisel this, we want to take a little bit off the top. We talked about finding the furthest part back on the stone. We have a belly here, so we can start back approximately a 1/4 inch at a minimum. You can take more or less, again, depending on the texture of the wall. But for what we're doing now, we're looking to take about this much off. Again, we'll start and make our corner first before we dress the long edge. So let's take a 1/4 inch beyond the existing guillotine edge and mark it here. We now want to transfer this mark down the face of the stone. It's very difficult to get a line with a straight tool because the stone is rounded. So I like to get down beside the material and I can see through my square to my pencil line. This will allow me to give myself a relatively accurate mark to work from. I can do the same thing on the back, and generally we'll take the furthest point in and use that for reference, and we will mark up. So now you can see we have two vertical marks. These marks will be 90 degrees to the table, or plumb level if you will. So again, important to have a flat table and a clean work surface. We will now work on dressing these two edges. Switch it back over here. Same thing as before. We'll get whatever we can with the chisel. We don't need to use the full chisel if we can't get it on there neatly, and we will take a bit at a time. This side required a bit less chiseling, but as you can see, it's becoming a little bit straighter. We will now work on this side. Take a little bit off the top now. Come into here. If it doesn't break the first time, that's okay. You can come back and get it after. There we go. Sometimes you'll need to hit this surface a little bit harder than the sawn edge. It's okay to do so. We're getting a little straighter. The corners will require a lot of work. You'll have to go back and forth. As you can see now, the nice edge that we had before is now curved because we faced the other direction. So we go back and we have our reference point. This is why I like to leave the pencil. I can see where I need to be. I take my square, line up those 2 points, and I'm still 90 degrees to my table. We're back to our straight line again. We're trying to take this corner back to a straight line. It will require a little more work. Again, we'll start at the bottom, take a little bit. Sometimes you can brace the stone against your body so it's not moving. This one's being a little stubborn, but that's okay. When you start to get close to your finished product, you won't need to use the square as much. I can still kind of see my pencil line and where I need to be, so I will just go by eye and try to line up those 2 dots. We're getting closer in that direction, and we're getting closer in this direction. I think we're okay there. We're going to go back to this side and look at this corner. If you're not sure, use your square. You can see you're close, but again, you still need to take a little bit of material off the top edge. So don't be afraid to use the square if you need to. I'm going to turn it around like this just for the video's sake. I'm going to chip just that top edge off of here. I'm going to clean up just the bottom a bit. We come back and we look this way. I'm pretty happy with the way that looks. It's got a bit of a bulge here. The more you hit it, the more white you're gonna get. So don't mess with it too much. That could, a little bit more could go, but that's not so bad. Let's check with our square and see how close we are. So you're not bad. You're pretty well there. And the same thing here. You're pretty well there. We'll check on this side. Sometimes you have to turn the square away from the stone because the stone will make it a little bit hard to get that nice and neat. So have your square here, we check those lines. Not too bad. If you were to draw a pencil line back through, you will more or less be on your white mark. We'll do the same thing on this surface. This stone's a bit flatter on this side, so we can put our square up against there and draw our line. Our pencil line is on our white corner. We're more or less okay with that. Never have your stone vertical on its back, on its face. The stone will go on the wall in this form, so try to work it in that fashion. Once we're happy with our corner, we will typically cut it to a certain length. For this instance, let's just say we're looking for an 11 7/8 inch corner, and we have a sawn edge here. We're going to take a little bit of material off the front, the same way we did with our first piece. We're going to make a parallel edge to what's there now. It's important that this line corresponds with this edge, so we end up with 90 degrees. If we want at this time, we could check that we have a 90-degree top, and it looks like we need just a little bit of chiseling here. so we can clean that last little bit up. We will chase this line around the perimeter of the stone. You can mark it all at once, you can mark it as you go. Probably not a bad idea to mark it at once so you can see if adjustments are required before you get to the end result. Now, it's not leaving us much to face off the bottom, that's okay. Sometimes the stones will be a little bit flatter. We're going to again connect the two dots. So this side probably won't require much, if any, chiseling, but we will mark it and we will take ever so little to get this where we want to be. Again, we still have our face marks. What we want to be careful with is our four corners on the actual corner itself. Again, that's why we like to mark it, so we're aware of what we're trying to achieve. So we'll start with this side first. Again, edge of the table. We want to get this end off. We'll start at the bottom or the top and work our way up. I like to start at the bottom and work my way up. Some like to go the other way. Won't be much to chisel here, but we'll do so just for the video. As you can see, not much is coming off the stone, but we'll have a wide corner. If we want to take more off, we could always do so. Not much to chip there, but the key is maintaining a nice width here. The more we chisel off, the skinnier the corner will be. So again, sometimes your corners will have less chiseling required than others. Now we'll work on the top edge. There you have it. A face with a corner. And this will now be ready to go on the wall. This corner is already built up the height, but if we were to add another course, you can see how this would fit on the wall. Like so. And as you can see, this now will travel up the wall vertically to give you a 90-degree surface or a plumb line, and the same thing back in this direction. You can see we will have a 90-degree surface or a plumb line throughout the corner, and that's how we make our corners.